If anyone says Vaush is wrong in the Professor Flowers debate, there's just no saving them, okay? There's no saving them. They're a piece of shit, okay? Because they're defending genocide. There's just that is the dichotomy in that debate. You're either anti-genocide or pro-woke genocide. You're either pro-genocide or anti-genocide. And certain people on the left are pro-genocide because it looks woke in a certain way.
Okay, so if you have no idea what any of that meant, let me get you up to speed. The tweet he is referencing is talking about a conflict from a couple of months ago that happened between the large left-leaning streamer Vaush and the small leftist video essayist Professor Flowers. My tweet is saying that Vaush...
Oh, his platform is so much bigger. He's oppressing this poor female woman of color. Oh.
Yeah.
With his subscriber count.
It's white supremacy, though. You got to understand. Listen, in a non-white supremacist world, Professor Flowers' channel would be the size of Vaush's, and Vaush's would be much smaller. It'd be the size of Professor Flowers.
Yeah, it's just part of the propaganda technique. It's like, oh, establish that Vaush has the power, and that Professor Flowers doesn't have the power. So Vaush bad, Flowers good.
Right. Yeah.
Vaush was in the wrong. This interaction began when Professor Flowers made a video critiquing Vaush for conflating black nationalism with white nationalism in a prior debate. Vaush reacted to this video on his stream. He disagreed with her characterizations of him. Professor Flowers made a video responding to his disagreements. He reacted to that video on his stream and disagreed. He then invited her on the stream to discuss, which ended up turning into a debate. After this, she released one final video on it, and so did he. That's not where this ends, but for now, that summary should suffice. The debate was, well, a shit show, as both parties have since acknowledged, and as we'll get into in a moment. But the effects that it had on the online left content space were much more serious and malicious. One of these effects, as Xander Hall has so succinctly put it in his video, is that it's treated as orthodox thought in debate spaces that anyone who agrees with or defends Professor Flowers in any capacity is pro-genocide or sympathetic to violent ethnostates.
That is the dichotomy in that debate. You're either anti-genocide or pro-woke genocide.
Now, this idea comes from somewhere. It comes straight from the source, actually. From the overlord of the debate realm himself, Vaush. Since this debate nearly 6 months ago, Vaush has continued to characterize Professor Flowers as being an anti-white racist, whose ideology inevitably leads to genocide. Here he is talking about it last week on his stream.
It's like Professor Flowers. I think that Professor Flowers is basically just an anti-white racist who stumbled into a misunderstanding of decolonial terminology. There are always bad people who...
See, that's very fascinating that Vaush says that.
Yeah.
Does he not realize that the outcome of all this decolonializing nonsense is that position?
No, that's why I want to do this video. This is the most fascinating thing, because Vaush doesn't realize that when he's arguing in favor of CRT, that's the position he's arguing in favor of. This is the Martin Bailey thing. His version of CRT is the Bailey. There's the Mott is the defensible position and the Bailey is the indefensible position.
Right.
Professor Flowers has he's called out Professor Flowers' indefensible position. Like he's basically targeted her and saying, you know, this position is indefensible, leads to genocide, et cetera, right?
Right, but what I mean is like here, let me play
6 months ago, Vaush has continued to characterize Professor Flowers as being an anti-white racist, whose ideology inevitably leads to genocide. Here he is talking about it last week on his stream.
It's like Professor Flowers. I think that Professor Flowers is basically just an anti-white racist who stumbled into a misunderstanding of decolonial...
Yeah, because he's conceptualizing this as like, oh, Professor Flowers is racist, and she's just using this colonialism wokeness to justify her racism. And it's like he doesn't, how can he not understand? Like, is he that dumb? Is he that out of touch?
Well, he's that
he doesn't understand, like, well, maybe that's the case with Professor Flowers. I don't know. But the philosophy she's talking about, the colonialism, the CRT shit, that all leads to that place naturally. She's not bringing that into the philosophy. That's in the philosophy.
That is the purpose of the philosophy.
Exactly.
Yes. No. This is what's insane. That's why when he goes on Tim Pool's show and argues with Charlie Kirk about critical race theory, he's not arguing about this version of critical race theory. He's arguing the made-up version of critical race theory. I don't even think he understands that this is the philosophy of critical race theory.
Right. Maybe.
But
So you're taking the he just is fucking ignorant position.
But this is what's so fascinating about this, because he's calling out the critical race theory position as clearly as we have called it out many, many times. Like I believe all last week we were talking about all of these mainstream media people. Basically, Joy Reid is a fucking racist, like nonstop on her television show every single day. I don't see anything different from the things that Joy Reid is saying and the things that Professor Flowers is saying. So it's like that position is the mainstream position.
There's a difference. It's just that Joy Reid is following the same ideology that leads us to the Professor Flowers genocide position.
Right. She's not. She's basically being more articulate about it.
Yes.
Terminology. There are always bad people who will mask their ideology through sort of euphemism and adjacent positions. How many super far-right fasci types cloak their positions in the front of like nationalism? Not like hyper-nationalist, fascist, whatever, but just like regular American nationalism. That's like the most common thing in the book, It's not even like anything PF said was that extreme either. It's ethnic cleansing.
See, the huge difference is, though, the philosophy itself is developed to empower the black nationalist mindset. That's the whole point of it.
Yes.
It's specifically for that. But you can't say that about conservatism. Like conservatism isn't a philosophy that's designed to foment ethnocentrism or white nationalism.
Well, they would say it is.
They would, but that's a mischaracterization of conservatism.
Well, I'm really glad you framed it the first way, because I never really thought about it on that language, but you're right. CRT literally is designed intentionally to foment the black nationalist perspective from the civil rights movement. And that's why, and that's, what Gary Peller talks about in race, in his conceptualization of race consciousness. The entire point of CRT is to say, listen, during the civil rights movement, we let the dirty liberals win the war about how to handle race stuff. But we need to go back and start to think about the black nationalist and the socialist conceptualization of how to, create our perfect society.
But Vaush, in this exchange, is taking the side of those dirty liberals that won. He's taking our side.
Yeah, now that he is being targeted by this,
specifically,
suddenly he drops all the CRT and all the socialism and all the race Marxism, and he becomes a dirty liberal.
Yes. Not only that, he in subsequent streams, he's like, oh, pardon me for coming off as colorblind, but we should be colorblind to this kind of shit.
Right.
It's like, ding, ding, ding. Isn't that the value of colorblindness? How can you foster a multicultural society without that?
I think what's going on here too is that we have FredTube is divided by, there's a battle between the economic Marxists and the race Marxists.
Right.
And as long as they have Donald Trump, as long as they have some right-wing enemy to go against, they can unify against that. But when the external enemy goes away, the daggers start to point inward.
Right. Yes. No, the economic Marxists, which you can make an argument that Vaush falls into that camp. Yes. They start realizing, hey, I'm surrounded by a bunch of fucking racists. And I don't like racists. I'm in a very peculiar position here. Like, I have one of them making hit piece videos about calling me a racist. Right. Then all of a sudden it's like, maybe I'm not so into this CRT stuff.
I don't get it.
There's enough lore and content regarding this interaction to last anyone who's interested until next winter, so I'm just going to give my honest opinion and summarize it in the following way. I do not think that anyone that has actually listened to Professor Flowers' videos on this topic can make any of the claims that Vaush and his fans continue to make about her. Calling her an anti-white racist that is pro-genocide or pro-ethnostates is a lie, as it was never the content of her arguments. It was a narrative crafted by the failings of the format of...
So the funny thing is that later he's going to play a clip that he thinks proves that Professor Flowers is not advocating for, or not advocating for, but is making white genocide permissible. And then the clip that he plays is her explicitly saying that it basically is permissible.
Right. Yeah, I know. He completely chimp climps himself. So
It's so bizarre. That's why I don't like I Noah's mindset here is very fascinating to me. He's like, how is he not aware of what's going on?
I feel like it's just this CRT bubble where
Yeah, he's just so ideologically possessed. He's born
right,
into it.
you can't like it's they live in this world where people of color cannot be racist. No matter what they do, they cannot be racist. So he sees everything said by a creator of color in the most charitable light. So charitable that it's completely innocuous to you unless you're being directly attacked by this person.
Right.
I mean, I watched several of her videos, and you can't say that she makes pro-genocidal arguments in every single video, but she definitely says racist shit in every single video. I couldn't find any videos that she wasn't being openly racist. Yeah.
Yeah.
Online.
I should say, and this is one of the things that's interesting about this controversy. When I say openly racist, I mean openly racist in a conventional way. Noah would not acknowledge that is open racism because he lives in the CRT bubble where whatever a creator of color says, it's not possible for them to be racist because they suffered so much injustice in their life that it's kind of justified for them to lash out at their oppressors, right? So I'm talking about a conventional definition.
Yeah.
One of the interesting Go ahead.
Oh, just a conventional definition. People judging other people on the color of their skin and
Right.
making a bunch of assumptions about what that entails.
Right. But CRT has erected this entire other definition of racism where it's like, we live in these systems of oppression, white supremacy, benefiting from white privilege and all that. And since Professor Flowers doesn't benefit from any of those systems of colonialism, whiteness, whatever you want to call it, it's impossible for her to be racist. So he doesn't see anything that she's saying or doing or interact in any of this interaction with Vaush as racist. But Vaush is like, no, this is racist. He takes a conventional position, the James Lindsay, Christopher Rufo, fucking Sitch Adam position. This is racism.
Debate streaming, more on that later.
We'll come back to this later.
But more importantly, thanks to the means by which this narrative was conceived, with Vaush arguing against decolonization and separatism using fear of retribution rhetoric.
It's all well and good to talk about living free of your oppressors, but when you break apartheid in South Africa, there are millions of white people living in that country. Like, what do? Do you just like ship them all out? Do you build camps? I mean, there's not really any way to do that without genocide,
It has created a hostile space.
See, this exact argument has taken place on the opposite side of the political spectrum about the fucking the white ethno state people, right?
Yes,
That question has been posed to the fucking white ethno state, and they fucking weasel out of it in the same exact ways.
Right, which is that's what Vaush's point is like,
yes,
you're literally just saying the same argument that the alt-righters said in 2016 when they were having these conversations.
But in the CRT framework, and their logic is pretty sound on this, they're saying the difference is one group is in the oppressor category and the other group is in the oppressed. And in this situation, it's inversed. So Professor Flowers would say, listen, but it's different because I'm the oppressed group. And if I want to genocide my oppressors, that's justice. Right.
Right. Well, and we talked about this, I don't know if it was Tuesday or last Sunday, where the CRT position and the alt-right or the white nationalist position, it's the same fucking position.
Right.
It's just replacing what race you want to be at the top of the hierarchy.
Yes.
And that's true of all race Marxism, because we're kind of using CRT a little bit broadly here. That's true of all woke Marxism, of all wokeness, of all race Marxism. It's literally the same as white nationalism. It's just let's replace who's on top. And it's okay for us to be racist against white people because non-white people are oppressed. And all that matters is oppression and power.
Yeah. All of this dialogue that we're having now, is it taking place in this exchange, but unconsciously? They're not talking specifically about any of the things we're talking about.
Well, yeah, Vaush is just narrowing it to her position, not realizing that it's the entire position of his team, quote unquote teams, when they talk about race.
Exactly. Yes. And that's what's amazing about this, because he just doesn't seem to realize that that's a common position. It's a very common position.
I know.